With just days left before Kings Island opens for the 2025 season, live entertainment has finally been announced, and a lot of it looks pretty familiar. Also, there's another ride that may not be ready for opening day, and we're pretty darn sure that this is the case. And there's a new dessert item available for Kings Island in 2025. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans, because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
Hey, let's kick this off by thanking our wonderful Prestige members. Thank you so much, Miss Mandy, 1983, Lil Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Logan Lipper, Aaron Bort, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Stephen Hornack, Eric Grau, Ian Crawford, Dustin Jackson, Songstress Miku, and Dakota Cole. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the content, exclusive videos, exclusive live streams, and hey, some tiers even get some free stuff. So hit that link in the description.
Ryan, you know, they say that history often repeats itself. And when you look at the 2025 entertainment lineup, that's what we have here, as a lot of the shows that guests were able to see last year back again this year.
Yeah. You know what? Let's just run down the list. All right. So let's start it off with Country Crossroads. Now, you and I both agreed this was one of the best shows, best country shows in the Fest House. And I mean, as long as I can remember, and you were citing something about like since the early 80s, right?
Yeah, since 1986. I thought it was the best country show that the park had. That includes country shows that are out in the Showplace Theater and other places in the park where they've done country shows. So I thought it was, very well written. They had a really good cast. The audience was into the show. So it was one of those, everything seemed to work with it. So I'm glad to see that it's back again this year.
Yeah, I like how they have like this segment where the girl plays the fiddle, like for Devil Went Down to Georgia and stuff. Because anytime there's a variation behind, that's not just singing and dancing or a slow song than a fast song and so on, I think is really intriguing. But yeah, great show. It's going to run May 24th through August 10th in the Fest House.
Now they have on the website, they called this in the description a all new show, but it's, from what I've been able to gather, it's the same show. What's new is there'll be some different cast members.
But if you haven't seen it, it's new to you.
That's right. No, I wrote a piece on it for Theme Parks by Don last summer. I thought it was that good that it warranted, kind of a story about it. And I watched it every chance that I could get when I was, visiting the park. I wanted to make sure I saw it at least once on those visits. Very well done.
Absolutely. Next up, really no surprise here. Gazillion Bubbles returns May 31st through July 6th in the Kings Island Theater. We did a whole episode on Gazillion Bubbles. It was better than I thought it would be. The kids love it. The families loved it. I'm not surprised that it came back.
No, it had good, good crowds every time that I saw it or walked by Kings Island Theater before the show would start. People were lined up to get in. It was also something that was repeatable for a lot of guests. You might not have expected that for a show like this. When there's the song and dance type shows, you have a lot of, regulars that get into those shows. And as the season goes on, oftentimes, especially those final shows, the first 4 or 5 rows in Kings Island theaters is the regulars. But this one, though, I mean, it didn't matter if you were, a regular or whatever. I mean, it was repeatable. Guests of all ages loved it. The only thing, for me about it is, it is still a relatively short run, May 31st to July 6th. So what do we got there? 5 weeks. I know last year was 3 weeks and they extended it for a couple of weeks. You'd like to see a little bit better run. So hopefully there is something planned for the Kings Island Theater after July 6th, or that's going to be a lot of dark days in that theater.
Yeah, somebody online pointed out that that's the time of year when it's the hottest. And July 6th is that's right in the core of 10 o'clock closes too.
Yeah, right in the middle of your summer season. So I would hope that there's something else that's going to go in there. I know that there was discussions about bringing, Brad Ross, the magician,
Yeah.
bringing him in. So hopefully there's something, and we're not seeing, a lot of dark days for these theaters, because that's always sad to see, especially when that when Kings Island first opened and through the 80s and, into the 90s, and that, entertainment was around every corner, and those theaters were filled, pretty much, the whole year, at least through Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Yeah. Next up, Hi-Fi Honey. So they're doing 4 shows, 4 nights, probably several shows each night. April 19th and 26th, May 3rd and 10th. I'm surprised that this makes the list. I mean, it makes sense because when we talk about early season, they're going to play before a lot of these shows open. But it's 4 days, so you talk about a short run. But excellent cover band, nice people. We've had Jessica on the show before.
Great following of Kings Island guests. So, there's a lot of excitement that they're back this year.
Yeah, you talk about having groupies, though. They got people that follow them. They play at the local casinos and so on. And now they got like a Taylor Swift tribute band and a Carrie Underwood tribute band and stuff. Like, they're going to be able to quit their jobs and just do this like normally before you know it, just as a cover band.
Yeah, but I mean, 4 days, but those are 4 days that they're putting people through the turnstiles because of the following that they have.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. And they're fantastic, too. They really are. Next up, this is a new show, Hot Rhythm Nights. I believe that the concept, this picture is from King's Dominion, I believe. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to essentially be the same thing that we've had on the bandstand with different songs and so on. I'm not saying that is a bad thing.
Same kind of show, different name. I know Dorney Park had something like this, based on the name and how it's being described. So very popular show there. What they've done in the bandstand in, recent years has been well received by the guests. I think the only, downside to it is there's nowhere to sit, so everybody has to kind of stand and watch. We've talked about that. But no, it sounds like, nice high energy at the end of the night.
Yeah. I love the bandstand at night. The standing thing, like, I don't know, it's almost like a dance party or whatever, even though they had the rule against dancing for a few years there, which was weird. But I'm looking forward to seeing this. So that's going to run May 24th through August 10th. So basically that's all the way through like the summer season, shall we say.
Pretty good run. Yeah, pretty good run.
Next up. So this is the reason why Don and I are both in a pretty decent mood, because you, the listeners, I don't know if we ever talked about this on the show. We were so close to not having daily fireworks from all the rumors. And
yeah, it seemed like there was a fight, where you have, some people at the park, including the park general manager, fighting for this. And then you've got, some people on the corporate team saying we don't need to do it every night. Other parks don't do it every night. Maybe just do it Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. It wouldn't be Kings Island without the nightly fireworks on nights that they close at 10 o'clock in the summer.
Yeah, if you had to choose between keeping the fireworks, like, hey, we're only going to do fireworks Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but Gazillion Bubbles is going to be all summer, they made the right decision, because I feel like that's some of the moving parts that they had to have. Especially, I mean, I don't want to get into the news, but stuff from China ain't getting any cheaper, and that's where these fireworks come from. So I'm over the moon. When I saw that this was released, that's the first thing I looked for. I'm over the moon excited that the fireworks are staying. The person who fought for this, we know you're listening. Thank you. You did a great job.
And don't forget the drones.
Oh yeah, the drones too. So we actually kind of joked that we thought that they would cut the drones and say it's because of the incident in Florida when they were falling from the sky. That was such an isolated. Even Universal cut their drones, but they weren't sure. Like, I'm not sure if they cut them because they had the opportunity to, because they are in a cost cutting mode because their attendance is down, waiting for Epic to open. But yeah, we still have drones. So hopefully this is a new show, even if it's
and don't underestimate the fact that your competitors in the region are all doing drone shows. Dollywood, Holiday World, Kennywood.
Mhm.
So when you have your competitors doing the drone shows, you kind of have to, almost keep doing it.
Well, I think that if if they stop doing fireworks, I think that would be horribly detrimental to the park. I think that the people fighting for it knew that. Because it's not about the fireworks, it's capping off your day at Kings Island.
Hmm.
So I I really think that you probably got some trouble um you, they probably got some trouble tearing down the vortex. If the beast doesn't open on time, which it looks like it will, they would get some trouble. But if they got rid of fireworks, I really think that people would be really upset about it, and it would really kind of ruin their visit.
That would be a major dissatisfier.
Next up, meet and greets. So meet and greet experience that's in the Peanuts Showplace Theater, April 18th through September 1st. So that starts on opening day.
Yeah, that's really well done in there. I just think sometimes because of where it's located, that not as many guests experience it as you think that they would. So
Hmm.
it's kind of, like I said, it's hard to find. You're in Planet Snoopy and then Camp Snoopy. You're looking around for the characters, you don't see them. It's just hard to find in that building. So I think a little bit more awareness for it is needed. However, you need to do that, to let people know where they are. Because every time that I walked in there, there was me and maybe 4 or 5 other people in there, and it's so well done.
It is. It's a real charm, and they did like the original version of it was under what's now Beagle Scout Acres during COVID, and I think that went so well that they moved it to a more permanent location. But it
Yeah,
is
but
very well done.
there you could see it though. If you were riding some of the rides or walking, to the water park and back, or you were on Woodstock gliders, you still saw it, where it was. Where right now it's kind of hidden in that building.
We're gonna have to do an episode on pitching ideas for getting people to ride rides and do attractions that are off the beaten path. Because like the Bat comes to mind too, where I feel like it would have triple the ridership if it wasn't where it is.
Yeah, it still does okay. I mean,
Yeah,
all right, what's next?
River City. That was Kings Island's favorite band before they dumped them for Hi-Fi Honey. No, but River City's cool because they used to like a lot of them used to be the backup band for the bandstand show. They're incredibly talented. They do a very diverse like cover of a bunch of songs.
Hmm.
Some of these people are in the Blitzen band, the walk around band during Winterfest. In this particular picture, it's got a couple people that were like regular performers that I think perform with them like occasionally, maybe. Um, but they got bongos, they've got keyboards. It's a very large band, so I think it's really cool. I'm glad to see them back.
Yeah, very popular.
That's April 18th, May 4th, and the 11th. That's 3 dates on that one. Next up, Trailblazers Extreme, June 21st through August 3rd. So that's another kind of short run. Um, you liked the show, didn't you? I think I
I
remember you.
did, but I know in talking with a number of Kings Island guests, and then seeing some of the comments and that on social media, that they're kind of tired of this. They'd like to see some kind of different show in there. Go back to sing, dance, whatever kind of show. So I think it's kind of maybe run its course. I know, last year, a couple of times that I watched it, that it wasn't standing room only, that
Mhm.
I'd seen at other times for it. So maybe it has run its course. I mean, it's very entertaining. If you've never seen it, definitely worth checking out. But after somebody maybe watches it 15, 20 times, it's not a show that is as repeatable as some of the other shows in the park.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that with a lot of the show types. Like, I remember when we first got the ice skating show. I think Endless Summer on Ice was the first one. That was like the best thing ever. And by the fifth year of ice shows, and they're different ice shows, it was like, if we get another ice show, I'm gonna walk off a
Yeah,
bridge.
yeah. This one just seems like It's one of those things that you look at, the wash, rinse, repeat, type formula that you might change the name, but it's basically the same kind of thing every year. So, maybe you'd like to see a little bit, something different there, something fresh, maybe 2026, we'll get that. But, again, just judging by the comments and just talking to some different pass holders about it, they're excited there's something in there, but they'd like to see something fresh.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sentiment that I saw too. Now, one thing that we need to kind of talk about, there's a lot of dark time where there either aren't shows or there are many theaters that are dark or whatever. Do you think that that's problematic? Like, how do you think that would affect the guest experience overall?
Well, I think there's a lot of guests that, they're maybe not riders, so, or they're not a water park, person. So what is there for them to do? What is there for the grandparents to do, and when they're there in May or, August, after August 10th or whatever, there's just nothing for them to do. So why would they visit, the park, unless they just want to eat, so I think that's one of the things that they used to always be, touting, marketing, something for everyone at Kings Island, but there are days that there's not, something for everyone because the shows aren't running, every theater's dark. So
I noticed
I think that's a little bit of a problem. That added value is not there. That's the one thing that nobody, if they do surveys and that, nobody's listing, really listing the shows out as the reason that they come. So it's an easy thing in the corporate office to look at when you're talking about cuts. Well, these didn't rank very high, but it's added value. It always has been added value. You go back to 72 in the park open, the shows were added value. Even though they marketed and promoted them, made commercials just for the shows, it was still, added value. So I would like to see, there be a little bit more of a commitment to that and, really think about, who the guest is and making sure that there is that value for everybody that comes through the front gate on any given day, that there's something that they're going to find that they really like. Because if they're not riding rides, they're not in the water park, outside of eating some food, there's not a whole lot for them to do on a number of dates.
That was what I was going to say. Like, I remember in the early Cedar Fair was a little bit better than Paramount was in the end, but I always thought like in the early season, like in the park map, and you might have actually written this, but it was like, what happens if or like, I think it was like, why don't you issue rain checks or something like that? And it was like, oh, if it rains, there's plenty of stuff to do. You can see shows, you can shop, you can eat or whatever. And it's like, for the first like 3 weeks the park's open, if it rains, there's nothing to do. It's like,
no, it's hard.
So I don't think that argument holds water. But also it's one of those things where it's kind of like, if people know that like, oh, it's going to rain, the rides are going to go down, like that's going to hurt your attendance pretty badly those days.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Dollywood, I mean, there's a commitment there to keeping all of their theaters, running throughout their operating season, which starts in early March, mid-March, and runs all the way through, the holiday season. So, they've committed to that, making sure that there's entertainment for, in all those theaters. There's not, the only time there's really dark days is when they're switching over type show. The shows are this one had its run in, then a couple of days later, the next one's going to go, just to kind of have that period. But, the theaters, if you go to Dollywood, you're going to find shows.
You are. So let's move on to some tidbits for your information. Okay, so the first one, update on another ride that may not be ready for opening. If you're a fan of the Monster, don't expect to ride it opening weekend or really anytime soon, because we're just a couple days before the park opens. So the ride has yet to be rebuilt. And Don, I don't think you've seen this yet. Somebody sent this to me while we were recording. That's not what I was looking for.
Yeah, there's a fence up around it now.
Yeah, there's a construction fence around it, obscuring the view, which the only reason they would do that is if it was going to be open to the public and they were not going to be ready.
So, yeah, once that fence goes up, that's usually a longer term type thing. So, yeah, don't expect to be riding it, I would say not in April, maybe not in May. or they wouldn't have put the fence up unless it's a long-term thing.
I would say that there's a non-zero chance that it doesn't come back. I'd hate to say that. Other tidbit: a freeze-dried twist on a Cincinnati classic has come to Kings Island. The popular blue ice cream will now be offered in the freeze-dried form. This unique new dessert comes from the mind of a teenage entrepreneur. Freezing with Aubrey partnered with Kings Island to offer her freeze-dried treats starting opening weekend. Guests will be able to find the dessert at various gift shops throughout the park. Now, they do have the freeze-dried candy. I wonder if that's her as well. I always thought that it was, because I don't know these people, but I've heard of this company. They're out of Northern Kentucky. But, the freeze-dried stuff is super hot, and what a great partnership. Great idea.
Great partnership. Outside of, the one story that I saw on WOWT, not a lot of awareness, for this from the park, nothing on their social channels about it, nothing on their blog. So, I think it's really cool that they're doing this. I think, it's very popular. Blue ice cream, the ultimate treat there at Kings Island. So, I think this is great to see, and I'm glad that we could bring a little awareness, to our audience about, being able to find this when the park opens for Season Pass Preview Day in just a few days.
We'll have to try it and critique it, because I'm sure it'll be fantastic. Let's move on to a segment we like to call Buy or Sell.
All right. Buy or sell, Ryan. So in 2026, that's next year, Kings Island will rebrand the most of the time closed international restaurant to the International Street Brewery, offering over 60 taps of local, regional, and craft beers, designed to offer a vibrant bar atmosphere with a wide selection of drinks and a lively social vibe. It's set to become a standout destination on International Street for that 21 and older crowd.
Sell. That's too good of an idea for them to have. No, so I don't know who sent this in, but that sounds like a press release, like a social media copy or something. But I like the idea. I like it a lot.
This would have been good to do for an April Fool's joke, right?
Yeah, but that's also kind of like, I almost like what they did more than this as an April Fool's joke, because I really think that you would get a lot of people excited that the IR is reopening that have been there in the 90s and stuff, and to find out it's just a joke might upset them. Well, the one that they did was kind of absurd. So it's kind of like, oh, that's it. Oh, wait a minute. There's no way they're doing that. Do you
You're
think
going to sell?
Yeah, I'm going to sell. But first of all, are you going to buy or sell? This is kind of a.
This one is. This might be the. With all due respect to those that have been submitting the buy and sells to us, I think this one might be, one of the best ones, because it's something that you can visualize, happening. You can see, why, that could work there. But I do have to sell.
Yeah. Do you see them ever doing anything with the IR?
No, nothing that would be permanent every day. You can count on it. Okay. Now, there'll be short runs. We've got Grand Carnival. We're going to have, buffet or something up there. You'll see those kind of things. But I don't think you'll ever see from the opening of the season through Winterfest that the International Restaurant, just like La Rosa's, just like Skyline Chili, just like the Brew House, just like Coney Barbecue, that it's open and you can count on it every visit. No, I think that's not going to happen. This, though, I think that I do like this idea, though. I really do. And I think that we know that there, are people that listen to the show that have decision-making abilities at Kings Island. And, this is something, at least I think it might inspire some ideas, maybe.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've been at the park and heard other guests say, where can I find a bar in this place? So they really need more.
Yeah, but I think you still might have that same kind of issue too, where International Street is or the International Restaurant is located, at the front of the park. A lot of times, once you walk into the park, you're not back up in that area again until you're ready to head home. That has always been one of the problems that plagued the International Restaurant, was just location. I mean, you can't beat the view. It's, but on those select nights, when they have some things up there during events and that, it can work. But as a day-to-day thing, it's always been problematic just because of where it's located.
Yeah, so I'm mentally like unpacking this in my head as far as the problems with the IR, and it seems like in today's environment, uh, in order to make it work, they'd have to put a lot of resources behind awareness and stuff. That's not going to happen. But on one hand, the instinct is making a nice restaurant that doesn't take the meal plan. If it doesn't take the meal plan, no one's going to eat there. That's just as simple as it
Yeah, you
is.
killed a lot of things with the meal plan. I mean, as good as that has been for the guest, and also very lucrative for the park. Let's not make any mistake about that, or they wouldn't do it. Um, it has made it a situation where once guests have the dining plan, they're not going to open their wallet again, for something else to eat in the park. For the most part, they don't.
Do you think that's true? Because I mean, for me, I'm not the typical guest, but if there's like a new chip dip or something like that, like I'll shell out the money for it. And I know that like a lot of my friends and stuff will get, like we'll go to the brew house and they'll get, a meal for everybody on their dining plan, but they'll also get like the giant pretzel for the table or whatever. Like that's got to be a thing.
I mean, they do, but I think for the most part, I think there is that percentage that they have their pass, they have their drink plan, they have their dining plan. That's it. They're not spending anymore.
I think that that's probably a plurality, but I mean, but the thing though is the problem is always like the thought process into it, because I feel like they're in that mindset of, all right, we got to do these dining plan things. These people don't spend any money, and they just kind of like do the minimum viable in a lot of cases. Well, what they should be thinking is, we've got all these dining plan people that are coming here to eat. How do we get them to spend money? And that's like, dip of the month and stuff like that. I used to buy that every month. And then they
Yeah,
had
there
the
was the
same
one
dip
thing,
for a month.
Chef's plate was one of those things that I always thought that shouldn't have been on the dining plan. But that was that, one thing, during those runs, those nights that they did that people would, spend to try that new dish that is only available that day.
Yeah, the thing about Chef's Plate though is, um, I I feel like most of the time it looks great, but 25% of the time it's like that looks like a side dish. And it's one thing to like burn up your meal plan on it, like that's disappointing. But if you shell out $22 for that and it's like not enough to even take the edge off your hunger, that's problematic. Um, I don't know, but that's a fantastic buy or sell. Really enjoyed that. Um,
You
let's
think
move
that's in
on.
the running for the best one we've got this year?
Yeah, we should have a bracket like Coaster 101 does for best park, but
Yeah. When did we start to introduce buy or sell? Was that around January at some point?
it was a couple months ago. Yeah, it was a good
Okay.
one. I really like that segment. Um, we'll be right back with the listener questions. First listener question, Ben from Springboro, Ohio. He said, this question has to do with security. I've often wondered what the park has around the entire perimeter of the park. Fencing, cameras. It really seems like if one really wanted bad enough to hike through the woods, they might allow themselves easy access. The main entrance seems secure, but what about the areas off the beaten path? And has everyone ever tried? Has it ever been an issue in the past?
Yeah, Ben. I'm not going to compromise, the park security measures, by saying what they have, where they might not have something. What I can tell you is the perimeter of the park, it's pretty secure.
Yeah, I imagine, you've got more insight than me, but I imagine there's probably a fence line around the property and you could probably get over it or whatever. But once you start getting into the core of the park, like they're going to find you real quick. Like you could probably poke around in the woods by the Little Miami River for a month and no one would care. But man, as soon as you got in a lockout area or something, you'd be on camera so quickly and they'd be all over you.
All right. Next, we have Dan, Greenwood, Indiana. He says, on the March 31st episode, Soak City was featured. During the podcast, the beach was mentioned as it had opened at a time when Kings Island did not have a water park. After Soak City was opened, the beach still operated for another 30 years, closing in 2019. Every time I've been to or thought about going to Soak City, I almost always turn right around and go back to the dry park because it is so full and I'm not about to stand in line for Lord knows how long for the water slides. I'm sure the beach closed for economic reasons, but with Soak City always being so crowded, I heavily question that. Perhaps Great Wolf Lodge was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back since the beach did operate for 3 more decades after the opening of Soak City. I don't know if I'm just weird, but I'd gladly go to the beach instead of Soak City, even though I've held Kings Island season passes for the past 6 years since moving to the area, and it's a free perk if it meant I didn't have to wade through huge crowds or entitled people that seem to grace Soak City. Do you guys have any insight as to why the beach closed beyond what economics, or is it just that simple? Given the crowd sizes that I've seen, I would think the area could easily support both outdoor water parks.
Oh yeah, it could support both. Remember, the beach is closed twice now. The first time it was owned by Hinkle Schuler, which is kind of a real estate company. That the subsidiary that owned the beach declared themselves bankrupt. Kings Island put a lot of pressure on them. A lot of it was it became like the Mason Swim Club, where people would buy season passes and drop their kids off. And for Kings Island, that's an annoyance. For the for the beach, that's like pretty critical to their business. There was some issues with overcompensation of employees, let's put it that way, which drove it into bankruptcy. Zip ahead a couple years. Adventure Holdings purchases it. They open it for a while. It's never marketed correctly. The first year was done very well, but then after that, it got into cost cutting mode. Only a couple thousand people there a day. I understand that they operated at a profit, but COVID hit, and even Soak City didn't open, so they didn't open. 2021 comes, and wage inflation was so crazy that they were going to hold off, and then the parent company got themselves into a little bit of trouble with various other parties and creditors and stuff, and that kind of put the nail in the coffin. They still own it. Don't go there. You will be arrested. They still watch it. There's cameras everywhere. Just trust me. Don't go there.
Right.
Damon from Fort Wright, Kentucky. Hi, Don. You seem to have worked with Jeff Sebert for a few years at the park in the past. I remember him being very visible and very approachable for several years. I spoke to him a few times in the early 2000s. Would you say he's one of the best or the best park general managers or presidents Kings Island's ever had? It sure seems that way to me, being a 30-plus-year-old pass holder. He seems to really have a great thing going on there in San Antonio. I'm missing interactions with him that I didn't see now or over the past few years. I wish we had way more of that at KI from the PR director and general manager. I just don't see it.
Yeah, Jeffrey Sebert, great guy. He was not a park president or general manager at Kings Island. He was a manager of what they called marketing communications at that time, which was the PR function of the marketing department. With that, but I did not work with Jeffrey at Kings Island. Our paths crossed when I was with the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks Hockey Club in the American Hockey League. Jeff at the time was working at Americana in Middletown, Ohio. He was kind of, wearing a lot of hats there, doing a lot of different things. I knew of him, but when I was one of the first hires with the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, and we were looking, how we would do our game night entertainment, because we knew Cincinnati not being a traditional hockey town, it also had to be, really be focused on a night of entertainment. Who could we bring in that could kind of be, on the microphone during stoppages of plays, would be able to handle a lot of the day-to-day marketing things, buying the advertising, just stuff like that. And Jeffrey was a name that was presented to the president of the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, Pete Robinson, and myself by a friend of the show, good friend of Brian and mine, Bill Mefford. He said you should talk to Jeffrey. Americana was one of those situations at the time where you didn't know year to year if it was still going to be there. So Jeff was didn't want to get caught in that situation. So he was looking at different opportunities. The Mighty Ducks being tied in with the Disney brand, was something that appealed to him. So we went to lunch with Jeffrey at Frisch's in Middletown, and we seemed to all be on the same page about what that role would be and where he would fit. And we ended up offering him the job, and I worked with Jeffrey for 2 seasons with the Mighty Ducks. And then after the 98-99 season, I was on vacation in Orlando at Disney World, and I called to check in with Pete Robinson, and he said, "Got some news, for you." He wanted to tell you himself, but since you're still going to be gone for another 5 or 6 days, Jeffrey has taken a job at Kings Island. And I knew that he wasn't going to be with the Mighty Ducks for long, that there was going to be opportunities for him to get back in the amusement theme park industry. I know that Kings Island brought him in multiple times to interview him for that job because they did not think somebody could be that, enthusiastic and, engaging, have that kind of passion. So they had to see if this is real. We need to bring him in a second time. Now we got to bring him in a third time just to make sure this is all real. So he had multiple interviews before he went to Kings Island. So, Jeffrey was great. He was, one of the PR people that was out and about in the park, very visible, like you mentioned in your question here, very approachable. I don't think anybody in the park's history has ever been as good as Jeffrey at, when you have a new ride that's either being announced or it's opening on media day. I think he was, that perfect face for the park for those kind of things. I thought he was outstanding. His time there wasn't super long. I think he was there a little over maybe 6 years before he moved on, but he's done just incredibly well for himself. Now president of Six Flags Fiesta Texas, and that park is a machine the way it operates. I mean, everything is, first class. He's got everybody, seems to be on board, buying in, to what his vision is for what a day at the park should be. And he always had, the guest, top of mind. That was, priority number one for him. Whether he was with the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, Americana, where he's at now, Kings Island, it was, it's about the guest experience, making it the best it can be. So, yeah, I mean, you're right about how visible in that he was, and what an asset that was for the park when you had somebody like that cared, genuinely cared about the guests. Now you can see other people sometimes in these roles, they go out and, they like to be seen, and so people kind of know they were out there in that. But you can tell real quick, who's genuine, who's authentic with it, and who's just doing it for show.
Yeah, great guy.
All right, the next question comes from Terry from Lancaster, Ohio. We just purchased our gold passes for Kings Island for 2025. We added all park passports so that we can go to other parks in the Six Flags chain. We have been to Cedar Point, Kings Dominion, and Carowinds in the past. Which other parks would you recommend as a must-visit within the chain? Also, we always purchase our season passes from Kings Island every year. Last year kind of bumped us out of Top Thrill 2 preview for Cedar Point. The home park season pass holders only got to go to that one. But I noticed that the trick to save money by purchasing from Canada's Wonderland may have changed recently. It recently added a tax onto, where's it at here? It jumped on me there. Said they recently added a tax onto the purchase where Kings Island doesn't. Looks to be actually cheaper now to purchase from Kings Island rather than Canada's Wonderland. Love the podcast and always look forward to new episodes. So, Ryan, is a great question from Terry from Lancaster, Ohio. If you had to recommend some other parks for them to go to, which ones would you say?
First, I'm mocking up a transaction to see if it actually is cheaper because that would be very interesting.
Well, you do that. I'll go ahead and jump in with some.
Yeah, why
parks.
don't you jump in with that part? Because I think both are important.
Six Flags Great America, Gurnee, Illinois, just on the outskirts of Chicago. I think that is a park that you should definitely visit. A lot of great roller coasters there. Some interesting, flat rides, other kind of thrill rides that aren't coasters. I've always enjoyed that park. Six Flags Over Georgia was one of my favorite parks when I first started traveling around back in the 80s. 90s. It had some hard years, but they're on the rebound now. They've added some new attractions recently. Have really enhanced the dining experience. So I think Six Flags Over Georgia would definitely be high on my list as well. Six Flags St. Louis, don't sleep on that park too. I think that's a sleeper park there.
Are they asking specifically about Six Flags parks?
Just other parks in the chain because they're all Six Flags now.
Well, right. I meant Legacy Six Flags Park. What about Knott's Berry Farm? That's another one that's like, I haven't been there, but I've always heard like that is the gold standard.
Yeah, well, that to me is good, but I think I look at that as that's definitely a getaway vacation thing. If you're looking for, that quick weekend type trips, if you live in the region of, near Kings Island, you're from Ohio and Lancaster there, I think you would definitely, you'd be looking for something a little more nearby, which to me is Great America and Chicago, Six Flags St. Louis. I would definitely try to get down to Georgia.
Yeah. So by the way, I'm doing the quick math here. So to buy a Kings Island Gold Pass, an all park passport, all season dining for all park, and the drink plan plus, which is the only way to go, by the way, after taxes and everything. And this is just my situation, and this is subject to change by the day, is $460.63 US dollars.
That's from Kings Island?
Kings Island. And then with Canada, it totals out to $485.84, but then converted to US dollars is $344.40. So it still seems like you save about $120 by doing that.
So the big thing is that conversion from the Canadian to American dollars.
Yeah, I mean, when I bought mine, I feel like the Canadian pass, like when I did the math for it, was cheaper anyway, and then the conversion. But for this one, it's a little bit more now. But the Canadian dollar is really weak compared to the American dollar, the US dollar.
Yeah, for me, math was never a favorite subject when I was in school. So to me, that's a little too much work to try to figure it all out. So I probably would still just go to Kings Island to buy
it. It's faster and easier that way. Okay, if you've got questions, we've got answers. Send them to Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com. Your first name, city you're from, as well as like your question, and we'll feature some of them on the show. Alternatively, if you're against email, send us a direct message on X/Twitter at @tower_topics. While you're there, hit that follow button if you haven't yet. Don, tell them about the t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts come in a wicked green color this year, available in whatever size that you want, just $22. That does include your shipping. Our costs have gone up significantly to produce these shirts, but we're not going to pass that on to you, the consumer, our fans. We're going to keep it flat still at $22. And if you're interested in one, just send us an email to that same address Ryan just gave out, Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com, or you can send us a direct message on our X. We'll send you the QR code. Once the transaction goes through, we'll get that shirt out to you as soon as possible.
Yep. Order now and have it in time for coaster stock for the group photo. Hey, I'm Ryan, along with I'm Ryan. I've never messed up this line. I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.